Welcome back, everybody. It's Tuesday, May 13th, 2025. Born on this date in 1903, early actor Paul Page of Birmingham. I noticed he was in a John Ford movie in 1930 about Navy divers called Men Without Women. It was interesting to me. Also in that movie, in an uncredited role as a radio man, former USC football player who still went by Duke Morrison. Of course, he would become John Wayne later that year in The Big Trail. In 1914, boxing legend, the Brown Bomber Joe Louis of Chambers County. And in 1993, actress Debbie Ryan, who was born in Huntsville but left Alabama at an early age. Today is National Apple Pie Day. All patriotic Americans know what to do. Today, let's talk about the interstate rocket, Space Command, tariff requests, and dog names. Then at the end, we'll go way back in the archives for a story about the time a couple of Birmingham news journalists followed a car that had a dude's hand sticking out of the trunk. I'll also share my favorite old newspaper movie, if you'll indulge me, just as an aside. My name's Ike Morgan, and we're down in Alabama.
This episode is brought to you by Temptations Cat Treats. Your cat will come running for the perfectly irresistible Temptations Creamy Puree and Temptations Lickable Spoon Cat Treats. The best time to feed lickable cat treats to your cat is anytime. Feed by hand for a playful moment, in a bowl for a creamy treat, or as a topper to make mealtime fun. Visit TemptationsTreats.com to learn more.
It appears that plans are coming together to put a replacement rocket at the I-65 Welcome Center at the Tennessee line, reports AL.com's Scott Turner. State Representative Andy Whitt, who chairs the House Economic Development and Tourism Committee, said $7 million has been secured for the project and that it's likely that the U.S. Space and Rocket Center will oversee construction of the new rocket. The rocket will be a replica of the Saturn 1B rocket that stood tall at the state line from 1979 until it was disassembled in 2023 because of the wear and tear of time and the elements. It's a little smaller than the Saturn V that landed men on the moon during the days of the Apollo space program. The Saturn 1B handled other jobs, such as launching Skylab. North Alabama Congressman Dale Strong still sounds confident about U.S. Space Command coming to Huntsville after years of evaluations, politics, and back and forth, reports AL.com's Scott Turner. Strong said he spoke with President Trump about the topic on Air Force One en route to Trump's speech at the University of Alabama earlier this month. He said the decision could come after the Senate confirms the nominee for Air Force Secretary, something he said could come this week or next. Strong also said he expects Space Command to bring around 4,700 jobs. That'd be 1,700 directly and 3,000 more as industries grow in the area in support of Space Command. Well, if the Trump trade wars mean the government will be offering strategic advantages to domestic businesses, then some of those businesses want in on some of that action. AL.com's William Thornton reports that 4 food production organizations are asking President Trump to do them a solid and target their foreign competition with import tariffs. This food industry coalition represents food producers throughout the South. They say that the current trade environment has allowed foreign honey, catfish, crawfish, and shrimp to pour into the markets here. Alabama has a hand in all those industries. They claim their industries face collapse without immediate action in the form of import tariffs and tighter scrutiny of their overseas competitors. Well, how do y'all name your dogs? According to a study from U.S. News and World Report, our top names here in Alabama aren't really different from the top names nationally, which is a little sad to me culturally. I guess I'm still looking to call Bear, Bo, or Skinner off the cold trail, while the world wants to call Bella over to put on her doggy sweater. Alabama's top 2 dog names last year, according to U.S. News, seemingly were at least partly inspired by the Harry Potter characters, Bella and Luna, in that order. Now, does that mean millennials never, ever turned over their pet naming power to their kids? Well, tied for third among Alabama dog names are Coco and Max. Nationally, the top 5 dog names last year, some of this is familiar to what you just heard, were Luna, Bella, Charlie, Max, and Daisy. Let's do a quick break, and then we'll share the story of a man's hand sticking out of a car trunk going down the highway. Y'all stay with us.
The spirit of innovation is deeply ingrained in America, and Google is helping Americans innovate in ways both big and small. Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority is using Google AI to create smarter tolling systems and improve traffic flow for Texans. This is a new era of American innovation. Find out more at g.co/American Innovation.
Hey, thanks for coming back. Now, we've all seen countless old movies that are set in old newspaper newsrooms. Citizen Kane, All the President's Men, Deadline USA, even Superman was a newspaper reporter. Now, my favorite is The Paper with Michael Keaton and Marissa Tomei and the greatest living actor, Robert Duvall. Now, it has some language, but that probably can be expected from newsrooms or movies. There were details in the newsroom language and characters that other movies never really got. People ask how unrealistic was it that there was a fight in the press room between Michael Keaton and Glenn Close. I answer that that is the most realistic part of the whole movie. I'm only kind of kidding. I stopped a couple press runs during my years putting newspapers to bed. Everybody's mad when a press run is stopped. Everybody's working later. They're missing publication deadlines. They're rushing news out, which is exhilarating, but terrifying because if you go late with the press, you really better get everything right. And I'm not just talking about factual things. That's important to get right all the time. I mean, all the sloppy things that can happen just before you shoot a page and send it to the plate room. Now, they're all thinking 3 things. 1, how much money are we losing every minute the press isn't running? 2, how many readers are going to cancel their subscriptions because the paper's delivered late in the morning? And 3, how can we make sure somebody fires Ike first thing Monday morning? Now, all that's to say that just as in current digital media days, newspaper work could be very exciting, even theatrical. I have an excellent example of a day on the job that could make a pretty good movie. It happened in Birmingham, Alabama in 1979. Now, this is a story some will remember. AL.com last retold it, I think, around a decade ago in video, and I've never shared it on Down in Alabama, so here you go. It was a regular work day in 1979 when Birmingham news photographer Jerry Ayers and reporter Mark Wynn spent part of the day following a car that had a hand waving from the trunk. Here's reporter Mark Wynn, who was a summer intern at the time.
So we were heading west on the interstate when about 5 lanes over through the morning mist, I said, Jerry, I really think I saw it.
City editor Garland Reeves.
We kept hearing this chatter on the radio. People were saying there was this car driving around and there was a hand waving from the trunk. It was driving up and down the interstate, and every time they get a report, the police would come back and say, well, we can't find them. And so we kept hearing that. What we need to do is we need to go out and find that car.
So Garland sent Birmingham news photographer Jerry Ayers and reporter Mark Wynn, who was a summer intern at the time, into the streets of Birmingham to look for a car with a hand sticking out of its trunk. Photographer Jerry Ayers.
When Garland would get a location, we would head to that location or that area, Took us probably 3 hours or so, The The longer we went, the doubt kept growing that we weren't going to find it.
When I reported into Garland that we had caught up to the car, he asked, should he call the police? And I said yes, because it was obviously not a joke.
I sort of stayed back far enough that they didn't know we were following them. Mark was the passenger, and I said, Mark, steer the car while I stick my head out and take a picture of it. I clicked off about 10 exposures. It was wiggling. The hand was actually, wiggling there.
I was excited. I think Jerry was trying to calm me down.
I didn't think maybe they could be dangerous. I thought they were dangerous. Otherwise, why would they have this person in the car? Something was not right.
We were totally focused on the chase, on sticking with them, on not losing them. And Garland the whole time is telling us, stick with them. By this time, I think they figured out they're being followed.
They know we're following them. I told Mark then, I said, Mark, I'm fine with chasing them all over Birmingham until we find out what's going on. I said, but if they turn around and point a gun at us, I'm going the other way.
We would follow them out of through this residential area. If they threw it in reverse, we'd throw it in reverse. And as we're headed out of this residential area, from the distance, we see this convoy of Birmingham police cars, blue and red lights churning furiously. They kind of pen the car in. We come up from behind. They pop the trunk, and this guy would later reveal he'd been in there about 14 hours, heard them discussing where to finish him off or dump his body. He'd been stabbed, robbed, and beaten the night before, but he was basically okay.
That's the first thing he asked when he got out is, I need a cigarette.
We headed back to the news building. We get off the elevator on the 4th floor, and the newsroom erupts in applause.
I went home and went to bed, just to rest, get some rest. And they called me up and said, Jerry, you need to come back down here to get your picture taken. I said, why? They said, because we're going to run it up with this story,
These pictures went all over the world. I heard about people seeing them in Tokyo and Rome, Italy. My folks were in Germany. They pick up the International Herald Tribune, and there's this picture of a hand sticking out of the trunk of a car with their kid's name in the caption.
It was so unusual. I mean, you just don't have hands sticking out of the trunk every day. It was just really strange.
Recalling my career, that's probably the most famous, as far as I'm responsible for, my 15 minutes of fame, so to speak. Yeah.
We couldn't get away from it. I mean, we had a responsibility, a moral responsibility, a journalistic responsibility to stay with that car. It just had to work out that way.
Oh man, Garland said you don't just see a hand sticking out of a trunk every day. I don't blame that guy for wanting a cigarette. Video producer Robert Clay did the original interviewing and editing of that piece nearly a decade ago. A couple weeks back here on this podcast, you might have heard Adam Schwartz mention Robert's name. He's one of the guys who do the SEC short sports comedy videos. Well, thanks everybody for listening to us. We're going to be back here bright and early in the morning. Until then, as always, come by and see us anytime you want to. We're on the World Wide Web at al.com.